Welcome to Vision Empower's panel discussion on STEM accessibility in the Indian education system in observance of the 13th Global Accessibility Awareness Day. I am Vaishnavi Gupta, Communications Executive at Vision Empower, and I'm delighted to be your moderator for today's panel discussion. As we gather here today, let's first reflect on the significance of this day. The Global Accessibility Awareness Day is celebrated every year globally on the third Tuesday of May with the objective to get everyone talking, thinking, and learning about digital access and inclusion for people with disabilities. As an organization working to make STEM education accessible for children with visual impairment, Vision Empower has been running a 5-day campaign from 13th to 16th May 2024, observing the 13th Global Accessibility Awareness Day through social media posts, volunteering events, followed by a concluding panel discussion today. Because we believe that accessibility shouldn't just be limited to digital inclusion, but also a wider range. And since we're specialized in STEM education, we thought this would be an opportunity to talk about how STEM accessibility in the Indian education, how we could ensure STEM accessibility in the Indian education system. Since its inception in 2017, Vision Empower has collaborated with various partners for accessible resources and technologies that have played a key role in the work VE does today in making STEM education a reality for children with visual impairment in over 120 special schools across 14 states of India, so that they can be at par with their sighted peers. And it is truly our privilege today to have few of our partners on the panel, without whom we wouldn't have come this far. So without further ado, let me introduce you all to our esteemed panelists for the discussion on STEM accessibility in the Indian education system. First, we have joining us Kartik Sohini, who is a disability advocate, technologist, and co-founder of iSTEM, earlier known as Project STEM Access, an organization that provides technical training, mentorship, and hands-on opportunities to blind students across India. Kartik is also the first blind student to pursue science education in CBSE and has been instrumental in advocating for change in rules that now allow blind students across the country to pursue sciences in high school. He has also convinced the top technical universities in India to open their doors to blind students, leading to at least 15 students in India pursuing engineering today. For his leadership potential and work, Kartik has received numerous accolades and awards, including the very prestigious Queen's Young Leaders Award 2016 and the National Award for Empowerment of Persons with Disability, which is India's highest honor for contributions to the disability sector. We welcome you, Kartik.
Thanks for having me.
Next, we have on the panel Pulkit Sapra, who is an IIT Delhi graduate and the CEO of Raise Lines Foundation, a non-profit organization that empowers persons with visual impairment through technology, focusing on mobility, education, and independent living. Pulkit is a social entrepreneur for over 10 years of experience in developing and disseminating assistive technology products. Under his leadership, Raise Lines Foundation has distributed more than 50,000 tactile books to over 20,000 beneficiaries across India, enabling students with visual impairment to gain a comprehensive learning experience by providing tactile resources and education-based tangible solutions. Thank you for joining us, Pulkit.
Thanks, and it's a great initiative. I really appreciate it.
Next, we have on the panel Paul D'Souza. He is the inventor and founder director of the CTO of Tushitech Labs, a company that specializes in developing cutting-edge technologies. With a keen eye for identifying and solving problems in the field of mechanical engineering, Paul specializes in the development of assistive technologies for the visually impaired. He has an impressive portfolio of 15 granted patents, 8 of which are in the field of assistive technologies for the visually impaired. Paul is not only a brilliant inventor, but he's also known for his collaborative spirit and ability to inspire teams to reach new heights. He continues to drive progress and shape the future of assistive technologies in India. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us today.
Thanks for that lovely introduction.
Next, we have our in-house accessibility consultant, Chandrasekhar. He comes with almost 40 years of experience of working in the IT sector in corporates such as Wipro, Tata Electronics, and Intel. After developing a vision problem, he started working on accessibility projects at prestigious organizations like Societe Generale, HSBC, Lloyds Bank, Intel, SUN Microsystems, etc. Chandrasekhar also volunteers in government schools to teach STEM subjects, and his interest lies in teaching rural students. As an accessibility consultant at Vision Empower, he ensures that Vision Empower's learning management system, Subodha, the web portal as well as the mobile app are accessibility compliant and meet the highest standards. Thank you once again, Chandra, for joining us. Yes. So as we delve into the topic of STEM accessibility in the Indian education system, let's start with knowing the most fundamentals of STEM education in India. And I would start with Karthik, as he is himself a person with visual impairment who's had a journey of his own challenges in the Indian education system of accessing STEM. And I would start with you, Karthik. I would want to know what are some of the challenges that are faced by students with visual impairments in accessing STEM education in India?
Thanks, Vaishnavi. And I think when I think about the challenges that students who are blind or visually impaired face in India, I really classify them as more of like societal challenges, and then the other ones are more systemic challenges. And primarily when you think about societal challenges, it has to do with a lot of biases in our society, but also low expectations inside of our community. And the latter being even more problematic and more dire than the former. So for example, in my case, what was really challenging was not only the fact that back then CBSE, as the Central Board of Education in the country, they thought that blind students wouldn't be able to cope up with the rigor of science and it would be too hard for us to be able to do that. And that was definitely a big problem. But what was even more challenging was what my mentors, friends, teachers, and even special educators told me in terms of, what I will not be able to do, and that the fact that I should be thinking about other subjects and other classes. And that becomes really challenging because for someone who's 15 years old at that time, they don't really think about, hey, I want to do something new. I really want to break barriers and all that kind of stuff. That's not how you think about it, right? Because if you're a good student, you want to basically make sure that you continue to be that. And when the world is telling you that you wouldn't be able to succeed, I think that's rather a really big challenge that you face in terms of just low expectations that everyone has outside of and inside of the community that really prevents majority of the students who are even interested to pursue science from doing so. But obviously, there's some truth to what people say, although, again, a lot of it comes from lack of awareness and a lot of it comes from the ground realities of how things are. And that brings me to the more systemic barriers that we face in the community, whether that is lack of accessible content. When I was a student back in 2011 trying to do my high school class 11 and 12, I did not have any of my textbooks available to me and literally would spend 4 hours every day typing out all of my text. While there has been a lot of advancement in technology, one of the things that iSTEM, for example, does is really helping to convert inaccessible content into accessible and usable formats with a particular focus on STEM education. So there has been that. There have been other organizations doing that as well. And it's great to see that technology has evolved. But when I actually see the availability of content across the country, when I think about all the state boards, when I think about all the central boards, that still is not where we would want it to be. And so that's a big challenge because, if you don't have content, if you don't have resources, and on top of that, you have biases and low expectations, and then you don't have lack of mentors, it actually becomes really challenging for you to succeed. And not everyone has the resources, in terms of perhaps teachers, friends, and parents and family, etc., that want to work with you to try and help you overcome a lot of the barriers that are enforced or that are imposed on you as someone who is blind. So I think that's definitely a big challenge. And then if you think about formative education, that's kind of where it becomes even more tricky because it's one thing to say that you need content and you need tactile diagrams and you need the resources that would help you to be successful in STEM, as specialized as it is, but there's this other aspect also around pedagogy, right? And non-visual pedagogy, and how do you how do you ensure that instruction is effective, people understand, teachers understand how to help someone who is blind or visually impaired visualize a lot of that stuff, or teach in a way where they'll be able to understand better. That training does not exist because there's a big gap between what is taught in special education and what mainstream teachers know about the domain. Where the mainstream teachers are domain experts, special educators have a lot of expertise in special education, and there is a gap in the two that is important for us to somehow think about. How does it actually converge to ensure that it's not just that understanding of how to teach blind students, but it's also that domain expertise as well in the actual subject that helps get the best learning outcomes for our students with disabilities. So again, broadly, if you think about it, it's really societal biases and low expectations. It's a lot of lack of resources that technology is helping with, but we're not. There's a lot more to do. And then the third aspect is very much around just teacher training, education, and pedagogy, pedagogical interventions that are required, that all kind of contribute to making this kind of challenging even today, unfortunately, for students with disabilities in the country.
Right. Thanks for sharing that, Karthik. You covered all the important verticals that make the Indian education system, and you covered how lack of resources, pedagogy, and biases all play a significant role in the challenges faced by students today in accessing STEM education. Going forward, you yourself have you've known the Indian education system well because you studied from the Indian education system, and then you went on to pursue your further education in Stanford in STEM. So, why do you think it is required for a visually impaired student to even pursue STEM? And even though STEM education is so visual.
Yeah. And I think part of the idea is, comes really to agency and autonomy. I think that's a fundamental thing that anyone should have. And not providing the same level of agency and autonomy to someone who is blind or visually impaired is just inherently not correct. And then I'm not even talking about, a lot of the core fundamental things that you just need to know, and the quantitative background or the logical temperament that you need to have to be successful in any walk of life. When you think about, education more broadly and the holistic education more broadly, that is something. Numeracy is something that you need for not just being an engineer or a doctor or what have you, which is kind of a very STEM specific sort of discipline. But no matter what you do, you kind of need that, right? But I again, that's an important sort of thing to consider there. But I think even more important is if someone wants to pursue something, would you deny a person who is sighted the opportunity to do that? No, our society does not do that, right? So I have a fundamental problem. Back then, I had it when I was a student in 2010, which led to the advocacy with the CBSE. I have the same problem today because it's not as if everything is golden. People can still do whatever they want to do. Just the other day, I was speaking to someone who was, for example, struggling, with pursuing, a course in chemistry at one of the IITs, which again becomes challenging, right? So that continues to this date, where people are not able to get the opportunity to study and do what they want to do. And by getting the opportunity, it's not just getting admission, right? That's only the first step. But do you actually really provide the support that someone genuinely needs to be successful? Right? Are you setting them up for success, or are you setting them up for failure as an institution, as an authority? And don't get me wrong, I think we've come a very, very, very long way. And I couldn't be more optimistic about what's happening in India. It's super progressive. Again, a lot of what we do at iSTEM is precisely for that reason, because we have so many partners like yourselves, as well as educational institutes, as well as corporates, and even the government more broadly that is wanting to do the right thing, which is really good to see. The challenges that we have, I think, it's a very long way. And then you also have to think about, where does unemployment stand for people with disabilities in the country right now? We have 20 million people with disabilities who are unemployed, and don't even get me started on number of people who are underemployed. And if you think about it, that's equivalent to the population of Sri Lanka as a country, right? And so that statistic in itself is staggering. And we know that the biggest source of recruiter for people with disabilities are a lot of these public institutions, a lot of banks. And if you think about entrance exams, one of the core reasons why our community struggles is because of this lack of fundamental quantitative and numeracy skills. So in a way, is not only preventing them from exercising, their right and their agency, but in a way ultimately leads to employment outcomes as well that we wouldn't want to see, which ultimately, of course, is a loss to the Indian economy. Right. So, of course, there's a social aspect to it. There's ultimately an economic aspect to this as well, where our country loses. I was reading this report. It's about $112 billion every year because of the unemployment amongst the disability community in the country at this moment, which is crazy if you think about it, right? And so you need to be able to develop those fundamental skills for people with disabilities to be successful in all counts, as far as where we stand right now. And that's why STEM is fundamental to that. And that's why I think it's important for us to think about people who are blind and how do we make STEM more accessible, inclusive, how do we provide them the support, whether or not they would like to actually pursue a very STEM specific discipline in the future after, let's say, their 10th class or what have you.
Right. Thanks, Karthik. That was truly insightful. It's not just the admission that matters, but the overall support that a child with visual impairment gets in the Indian education system. And we have with us Pulkit, who's actually working to make STEM education accessible by providing resources. So, Pulkit, I would ask you the question of the kind of resources that you're creating. We know that, Raise Foundation is creating tactile diagrams. So, for the audience here, what exactly are tactile diagrams and how are they created?
Yeah, I think overall it was a great start. Like Kartik has set a full bench pedestal for us. So basically, tactile resources are tactile diagrams are anything that are interpreted via touch rather than sight. So, like for a normal student, sighted student, if they see a book, they see a diagram and they can see the labels on the diagram, heading on the diagram, and understand it. Similarly, tactile diagram has, instead of colors, it has textures, multiple heights, or different line styles like dash line, dotted line that a student can touch and understand. So overall, like any visual thing can be converted into tactile, but there are certain level of guidelines that we follow while converting a visual concept into tactile. It's not a direct conversion. So there are multiple steps involved in doing converting a tactile diagram and creating one. Tactile diagrams have been there for more than like 2 or 3 decades. Like students, teachers have been creating these tactile diagrams with hand using cotton, thread, buttons, and all. Only thing that Raise Foundation is focusing on is making it a standard and scaling it. Like how can these diagrams be produced in large scale production and reach society? So the steps involved in production of tactile diagram, first step is definitely designing the diagram itself. So designing has multiple steps. First step is simplification. Like you have to simplify the diagram. Not you cannot take the standard diagram that is available for the sighted person and just trace it. Okay, you need to simplify it. You need to magnify it if required. Eliminate whatever is not required, and if even required, you break the diagram in multiple parts. So all this is what goes into designing a tactile diagrams, and there is where the role of special educators and teachers is much more important because they understand how a student can interpret this diagram. And so this is the first step. Then the second phase comes is production of the diagram itself. So once you design the diagram, there are multiple ways, multiple production techniques that people use to produce these diagrams. The most standard technique was using handmade, but now there are standardized large-scale production techniques. Like you can use a braille embosser available in your school or nearby organization to produce that diagram. There are swell sheets available. They are little costly, but still, if you have that resource in your school, you can quickly create one diagram, print it out, and give it to students. There is for what Raise Foundation mainly focuses on is thermoforming technique as a technique to produce diagrams, where we use a mold, and using that mold, we create multiple copies of a diagram. This reduces the cost significantly. That's why we use these techniques to produce books in large scale. But now, what we are also working on, and there are some standard solutions around it, is there are certain drawing boards, there are certain uh, games through which these tactile concepts can be conveyed to students much more easily. And it's my request that the awareness about conveying these concepts and how teachers can use these resources available in the market to teach students in a regular classroom is much more important. Lastly, in any tactile diagram or in any technology is testing and feedback. So this loop happens in tactile diagram also. So when once first you design it, then you produce it, then you test it with student, you get the feedback, do the changes, and then again produce the final diagram to be provided in the.
All right. Thanks, Pulkit, for telling us about the process of how tactile diagrams are created and what they exactly mean. Now, when we're talking about tactile diagrams, how important are tactile diagrams in, what are the roles that they play in breaking down the barriers that in STEM learning for the visually impaired?
Yeah. So I think it is very clear that STEM is dominated by visual concepts, right? If you talk about maths, there is construction, there is type of triangle, and teaching a student type of triangles without even showing a triangle is not feasible. Similarly, when you talk about science, there is solar system, digestive system, physical processes, full concept of light, and similarly coming in geography, there are maps and everything. So in every subject, there are a lot of visual concepts that have to be taught to students to get a comprehensive understanding. And that is why the role of tactile diagrams is very much necessary in making this content accessible for the students. So that is the first and the main thing, that it's very natural for a sighted person that to assume that diagram is always available for us, but it is not very natural for visual impaired. Okay, the books they have been using for many years have only braille content in them. In books that are provided, there will be a reference that refer to figure 3.1 because the books are directly translated into braille, but there is no figure 3.1. And this has been the main challenge in teaching STEM education to visual impaired, because one is that you just make the content accessible, but the other is that make the content easy to understand and better. So that is where the role of tactile diagrams comes into picture. I'll also give you an example. So you're working in a school and where I there was a I gave student tactile diagram of this tree, and a lot of students told me that this is not a tree. I asked them why this is not a tree. They told me that a tree is cylindrical. Okay. So then I asked them, why do you feel that tree is cylindrical? They told me that whenever we touch tree, we hug the tree and it is always cylindrical. So the concept of leaves above the tree is not clear to the students. And this is the gap that is created when the resources are not available. You give students a diagram of a sun. For us, sun is a circle with lines going out, right? Student asks us why the lines are going out. Then you teach them, okay, this is the concept of visual way of representing rays. Rays are usually not visible to us, but this is how we draw sun. Okay. So this is where the role of tactile diagram become much more necessary. Second is like it also ensures equal participation in class, right? So in an inclusive kind of setup where a visual impaired student and a sighted student are sitting in the same classroom, studying the same concept, just the mode is different, right? And this is where the tactile diagram actually defines inclusive education. So this is how what we feel tactile diagram are much more important. And it also reinforces overall learning, right? Once you have a hands-on understanding, not just so we have got a lot of feedback from overall print disabled community. Like students with autism also use tactile diagrams because it engages them, not just visually impaired. So there is a lot of reinforced learning that happens to tactile diagram and can be definitely used with other assistive technology. Like if you don't have to print all the content, there can be a supplementary tactile books which can be used with ebooks or braille displays or anything, right? So there is one way. Also, once these resources are available with student, it builds confidence, right? Students bring back to us sir, we understood this concept when the teacher was describing it, but today it is clear to us. And this is something which is very much important, right? Because once students say this, that today this is clear to us, I'll now remember it for a long time. This is where the confidence keep on building. Okay, I have my basic understanding, I have my basic concepts clear. Now I can pursue STEM. So that's why the role of tactile diagrams in all this education system is much more important in understanding overall STEM concepts.
Yes, that is very insightful, Pulkit. It is true that tactile diagrams play a very important role in breaking down the STEM barriers. And I have a recent example that Vision Empower recently conducted Science Day across different states and different schools. And our children were supposed to display, like how we have science exhibitions in the sighted schools. It was our idea to do the same in the schools that we're working with. And the children, there were other sighted students who came as participants and visitors to see what the children with visual impairment had to show them. And the children with visual impairment showed different tactile diagrams, different models that they used to study those concepts. And we have so many, brilliant responses from the sighted students and the visitors that they were surprised that they're learning so well because of these diagrams, because of these models. And so many of these concepts, the sighted students themselves didn't understand so well that the children with visual impairment understood because of those diagrams and those resources. So it's truly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
truly,
I would like to
yeah.
add to it also increased curiosity amongst
Yeah.
visual impaired students. So we now are creating more and more books which students ask from us. So recently, student came to us not just for STEM. They came to us, sir. I have visited Taj Mahal 3-4 times, but I still don't understand how Taj Mahal look like. So we created a book on monuments. Student asked us that, how do you know I am happy? How do you know I am sad? So we created a book on smiley faces. Okay, so it's not just STEM, but our world around us is so visually dominated. We use presentation pictures everywhere, and this is not there for visual impaired. So that's why tactile diagram plays a whole big role, and especially in STEM. Yeah.
Yes, very well said. That's very true. And we're happy that Raise Line Foundation is one of our collaborators that is making it possible to reach to the students with visual impairment with the tactile diagrams. Now, when we're talking about resources, as you mentioned, Pulkit, tactiles have been here for 2-3 decades. But when it comes to technology, that is not the case. Technology is pretty much a very new thing, and especially for the visually impaired students. So I would like to ask Paul, who's the innovator and our own Hex's Braille reader. And I would ask him share with us what are the tools and innovations that are available for students with visual impairment to study STEM.
Yeah. Hi, Vaishnavi. So what I can talk about is Karthik has given a brilliant overview of the stuff, and then Pulkit has added a lot about tactile diagrams and the need for everything to be tactile. And I remember Vidya also mentioned early on that this field of education needs to be more holistic in the terms of including more tactile in to make it more accessible, because this digital revolution has kind of created a huge gap between tactile and what's available to the sighted, and and the lack of the compatibility of the digital with those who are visually impaired. So based on some of my experiences in this field, of course, we have the Braille displays, and we've been trying to make them affordable and stuff like that. And Vision Empower has helped us tremendously with encouraging us along the way and partnering with us. So we have basic stuff to make, for instance, books and literature accessible. But and we're also working on stuff to make tactile printed embossed Braille accessible books, which have both Braille as well as the visual information, and we're doing that with Chetana Trust. But that being said, the gap is still very, very large between, and for what is as Karthik said, it's sort of he can't accept that what is acceptable to someone who's sighted should not be made available to someone who's visually impaired. But from practical experience, for a lot of reasons, I would say financial as well as thing in countries like ours, these facilities are not available to everybody, and some of them come with a very high price. So when it comes to designing stuff and making stuff accessible, I think we need to do some amount of rethinking as to how we approach the problem. I had a very interesting little anecdote I'll tell you about when I introduced the bisectors, and I was demonstrating it to a group of sighted engineers, and the response was kind of ironic. They said, "Isn't this a form of cheating?" And I couldn't believe that I was hearing this from a sighted person. And I said, we are doing exactly the same principles involved in teaching math, except that we've come out with a different instrument to do that. And but that got me thinking, and I said, why can't all our stuff be designed for the visually impaired and then made accessible to the sighted? Or then they would find it much more exciting to use it. And that's the experience we had with that. And so I and my team have been doing a lot of thinking on the subject, and where we want to actually design for the visually impaired. And the side benefit would be accessibility to the sighted. It will kind of reverse the problem in our own minds, so that we make our focus shift a little bit, and we try to basically approach the problem from of accessibility from the other end of the spectrum. So that's basically what we've been doing. And in terms of what availability of technologies, sadly, we don't have too much available. There's a ton of stuff that needs to be done. For instance, when you're doing STEM education in a chemistry lab, we have to start by being able to store the chemicals in containers that are accessible to someone who's visually impaired. They need to be able to identify what's in those little test tubes or the chemical storage facility. Then they need to be able to weigh them. They need to be able to check the color. They need to be able to check the temperature. They need to be able to check the consequences of two chemicals reacting with each other. And we are sadly lacking very badly in terms of how we can explain that to someone who's visually impaired. So we are trying to make those facets of accessibility change. So the approach that so Supriya had got some students from I think, and she mentioned that some students from Goa had done a good job of studying this problem of accessibility, especially with respect to labs. And so we pick up ideas from these people and whose students and the likes who've done research, and try to work towards providing solutions, accessibility solutions, from a different point of view. Once we succeed with that, XRCVC did a fantastic job with the studying the geometry kit and degrees of accessibility. And they did what normally you don't find in research papers, but they said there was a chapter 10 in their research that said these are the ideal characteristics of a geometry kit and geometry equipment that we need to teach. So they defined the problem in such a way that a technology person would be able to design something that is accessible just by following those guidelines. And that is something that we need when it comes to designing stuff to make this stuff more accessible. And if we can kind of bridge the digital to tactile gap as a second step, if we can design even if we don't have the accessibility in place at the beginning, like for instance, if we design a whole set of equipment that is suited for the visually impaired, maybe the digital aspect of linking it to something digital later, to as a storage system or a backup system, or access to other information that's available in the digital realm, that can be done as a second step. But the first step of actually building the tactile, as Pulkit was talking about these tactile diagrams and the whole revolution, the change it brings about, the excitement and that kids feel when they feel something new. And then you have the interaction that comes when you're trying to explain the tactile to them and relate that to the real experience. When you're doing things like that, all that is, I would say, is the first step. Then bridging the gap to the digital revolution would be a second step in that sort of realm that we are moving into slowly. So that, in a nutshell, is what my thoughts on this subject are for the moment.
Truly said that, bridging the tactile to digital gap is something that we can, we have to work on. Do you have any additional innovations that, are needed to make the journey much more easier for students with visual impairment to pursue STEM education?
Yeah, so in the recent past, I've been working again at the request of Supriya initially. When she first saw one of my things, she says that'll be perfect for teaching math. And that was a little braille cell. So it was a mechanical braille cell. So I'm trying to work on what would be called a math pad. That would be an equivalent of the Taylor frame to teach math. The Taylor frame is very cumbersome and complicated. In a sense, you've got to memorize a lot of stuff to use it. And then there's a slightly less complicated version called Cuborithm. And so I'm trying to work on stuff like that, where at this stage will be purely tactile, but it would help the initial phase of making learning math easier, because concepts like the spatial positioning of numbers and the use of mathematical operators like the plus minus signs and adding more than one rows of new numbers together, things like that, it would give them a more what should I say, a better understanding spatially of how math works for someone who's sighted. And then we decide whether we go that way and then do the digital bridge later, or whether we continue with the sometimes like things like the abacus. You don't really change it to digital, because it's so perfect in itself that you let it sort of work in its own sphere, because it's so perfect that the abacus kind of does what you can do digitally, and probably better, but you can do tactile with it, totally tactile. So things like that. Sometimes you come across things that are tactile in nature that you don't want to change, or it doesn't make sense to change. So we have that as another path that we can go down, is where we have something that's totally tactile. And if we can make learning math easier, just going totally tactile at this stage, then if it makes early learning of math easy, then we should not disregard using that as a what should I say, a foundation stone for learning math. And that's what I'm currently working on, to try and make learning math easier, and at least for the initial stages. Then later we can, as technology advances, we might be able to adapt better and make accessibility to the other forms of information available, and integrate the two. So that's basically what we're working on, Vaishnavi, at the moment.
That's wonderful to know, Paul, that you and your team are working towards such a brilliant technology, and I hope it comes to fruition. And now that we're talking about, technology, one of the technologies that have really boomed to make learning much more convenient, I would say, is also learning management systems, which learning management systems really, help people to access any course, anywhere, anytime, with the availability of internet, and makes, learning so much feasible and possible. So my next question is for Chandra sir, who is our accessibility consultant. I want to know, Chandra, how important are learning management platforms like Coursera, edX, or our very own VE's learning management system, Suboda? How important are these in facilitating STEM education for visually impaired students?
See, this learning management system, especially Coursera or OpenEdX or our Suboda, basically, all these platforms, they're in the digital form, and they have so many good features. Good features like, they are compliant to a screen reader, and and the the complete content is accessible to the all kind of users basically. uh, the platform is accessible, and the content is also accessible. It is made accessible to the all kind of users, and it is not in one place, it's not in one language. It is available in a various local languages, so the students can learn in a respective local languages basically. And second thing, it is a diversified. The student, they can take any language, any topic. Whether someone can take a mathematics, or someone can take a science, or in that particular thing, or engineering subject, or anything, they can enroll for that kind of a particular subject in their own language, and then they can study. So, and it is also, again, it's a flexible, they don't have to do, in less than 3 months they have to complete this lesson. They can finish their courses in their own pace basically. So they don't have to hurry up or something like that. They can complete their course in their own pace, and then take up the exams also. And while studying, if they have any issues, or if they are not understanding any topic or something like that, they can there's a community available. They can talk to their peers and post the questions in the online learning management system, and then they can revert back with the answers. So that way, it helps to the vision impaired users. Not only vision impaired users, it can be this is available for all kind of students. At the same time, it is especially for the vision impaired. It helps really very good. And second thing, they can, after completion, they can take the certification also. So this certification helps the students basically to add the more credential to their CV, so they can compete for the better jobs, kind of a thing like that. So this way, the digital platform, as well as the content, it is very helpful to the vision impaired students as well as to the sighted students, I can say.
Right. Very correctly said, Chandra, that one can access courses, learning can be made very easy when we have platforms like these. Now that we're talking about learning management platforms, it's great that, it enables visually people with visual impairment to access uh, different learning courses and different content. But what key considerations should be taken into account to ensure that both the platform itself as well as the digital content, particularly visual content related to STEM subjects, are accessible to children with visual impairment?
Basically, I'll divide this into two. One is a digital platform, and the one is a digital content. Or the content, what content goes into the digital platform for the online studies. See, all these, first thing is the digital platform should be available. It should be compliant to a screen reader, and user should be in a position to navigate and enroll himself, and then take whatever courses he want to take, and then he can see his attendance, he can make um, his he can submit his assignments, all that. This should be available in the access screen reader friendly format. And second thing, whatever uh, the content is having any pictures or something like that, that should be, again, there should be alternate text available for them. And if there are any multimedia related stuffs are there, so that should be, again, there should be a proper description and transcripts and captions, audio, the basically captions for the videos, all should be provided, considered in the online learning management system. And at the same time, there are some more things that, I can say in a simple word, all these should be compliant to the web content accessibility guidelines. Now, the guideline, the current guideline, I can say that the WCAG 2.1 guideline is in force, and then the draft one is 2.23. 3.2, 3.0 is in a draft version. But if we consider this WCAG 2.1 guidelines, at least most of the things can be addressed for the these platforms as well as for the digital content. At the same time, after creating all these content as well as platform, it should be tested by the users periodically, whether the content is made compliant to accessibility standards. They have any issues with the content or like that. So if any issues are there, then they should take the feedback and make it more compliant to the users. So these are the key considerations we need to do when we online management systems as well as for the content for the management system.
Thank you, Chandra. That was really insightful. All of us have shared the different areas that you all are pioneers of, I would say. So going forward, I would want to ask a question, a concluding question to all our panelists. What are your top 3 pieces of advice for various stakeholders, whether it be parents, special educators, visually impaired students, or organizations working for the persons with disabilities or innovators, to ensure that STEM education becomes universally accessible for every visually impaired child nationwide? Whoever wants to go first?
Question I can take up.
Sure. Yeah, please go.
See, for me, what I wanted to say for the top 3 considerations, I can say. First thing is we need to uh, uh, include the parents, child parent, about the accessibility related stuff, and then we have to educate the parents also along with the children, so that they can sit with the children for longer time and help them to study it. This is the first. It starts from the home, I can say. And second thing is the society. There should be a proper awareness for the children and among the people. If there are any issues with the you can, especially when I completed my masters, when I used to travel in a bus, the people in a bus, they used to come and say to me, "Sir, can I read some chapter, some topic for you?" So that kind of thing, help voluntarily should come from the society, so that people will they like there are supporting system is available, and they can get motivated on that particular thing. And third thing is, I can say, this awareness among there should be a check and balances. So there should be a proper governance, I can say. If something is not working properly with reference to the accessibility compliance, I can say, there should be someone to say that, hey, this particular thing is not working properly, you better make it compliant, or there will be a penalty kind of a thing. That kind of a thing should be available, especially in India, I can say.
Right. Thanks, Chandra.
Correct.
Pulkit, you want to add?
Yeah. So I got disconnected. I'm really sorry. Yeah. So basically, what I was talking about is first thing that I suggest is that schools and organizations should start investing in technology and resources, because this is one thing that has not happened in this sector. Uh, Students, like, the availability of resources have been there. Various resources from time to time have improved, but schools and organizations have not invested. When I'm saying invested in using these resources, purchasing and using these resources. If you are not able to purchase, ask for support, but at least create a mindset that you will use these resources. These will not be logged in a Almira and won't be provided to students. So that would be my first suggestion to the key stakeholders, that let's invest in the idea that assistive technologies can be used in the classroom. And second suggestion would be collaborate. So a lot of these stakeholders are working in all their silos and they do not collaborate with each other. So share your challenges. Like, when I say collaborators, ask for something that we don't know how to teach this. Please help us in teaching this. We don't know how to make this accessible. Please help us in making this accessible. And this can obviously generate a lot of support. Now there are multiple organizations in multiple cities, multiple states who have been working in this sector. So all these organizations will automatically come forward if the original users or stakeholders will ask for support. So that is second suggestion from my side. And lastly, obviously, teachers are the what we have realized is that for a student in a school scenario, a lot of special schools are residential schools. So for them, teachers are the sole role models and mentors. If teachers think that students can learn STEM education, they will automatically kindle the interest of students. And so what we need to ensure is, and what Vision Empower is also being doing through its Pragya program, is enable them, train them, and motivate them. Is what I would like to say from the teacher end. And starting from where like Karthik started, like we all as a society have to believe that students can do it. So that is where the key thing, the key seed is required. So you have to believe that students can crack IT. You have to believe that they can pursue a career instead, and then automatically things will be put in place, policies will be put in place to make that happen.
Thanks,
I'm happy
Pulkit.
to add to that, and I'm not going to echo what has already been said. Very well said. I think just building on top of that, also having this belief and conviction in students themselves that they are able to do whatever they aspire to do, but also being a little realistic, I think, is really important as well, and making sure that students are able to make well-informed decisions. Because one of the things that I also see is, there are both the extremes. There's one extreme where students have very low expectations, which of course, as Pulkit said, we need to get over it. It's important that people understand that they can do it. The other extreme is that, this can also kind of play out where students don't realize what the current challenges are and do not have an understanding of the resources and support that they would require and do not have a plan. And that leads to a lot of disappointment, and sometimes that does people more harm than good. And so I think it's important for us working, for those of us working in this space, but also schools, and all of our organizations, and ideally also the government, to be able to create structures where we're able to provide that information to students about, hey, this is a support system available to you, and these are the various attributes and characteristics of various careers that you can pursue if you were to, for example, pursue a degree in computer science or mechanical engineering or civil engineering. And this is where your disability, where there might be functional limitations, and this is how you could basically think about accommodations, and these are the accommodations that you can use. And if after that the student makes the decision to pursue that career, I think it's great, and the student should be provided the support. But it's the ability to help someone take a well-informed decision, I think, is something that I don't see happen all that much, right? So really from a career discovery perspective, really from a support ecosystem perspective, that is again something that I think is important. The second aspect is also around technology innovation and R&D, and this has to do more on financing side of things, right? There has been some success in terms of assistive technology innovations, and the whole concept of investing that Wilkit was talking about. It would take it a step further and say investing also, let's say, by social impact investors, right? Investing also in R&D by the government. Yes, there are schemes, that are there that purportedly are supposed to help with that, but it's not enough. And the kind of opportunities that are available globally often do not account for the specific circumstances in India, right? Going back to the high cost that Paul was talking about, and the need to develop low cost solutions. We have a lot of ingenuity in India, but the resources to be able to invest in these kinds of solutions to solve problems specific to our communities is something that I don't see much of, that I think definitely needs a boost. So that'll be the other thing that I would offer.
Thanks, Karthik. Paul, do you want to add to that?
What I wanted to just make an observation and a point that hopefully we can all learn from is, like, organizations like you'll have a whole host of teachers and support staff that who are working in this. And if there's some way that an additional level of documentation, of all the problems, like for instance, a particular teacher encounters in their particular subject, in their particular class they're teaching. And if they could document that stuff, that would provide a wealth of information in the realms that we as technology people would need to work. And it would our thinking into solving specific problems that exist and not sort of more generalized problems that we imagine exist. We would actually be dealing. I remember Devi, she was showing me a textbook and she said, it's I think class 8, and I was going through it with her, and she said, look at this, look at this, look at this. And I said, how was anyone, how did they manage to explain this to the students? She says they don't and they can't. So I said, what happens? They drop it. She said they drop it. So that was something that it shocked me, because I said, if you can drop an entire part of a syllabus out because there's no way to explain it, there's no system in place to provide that type of education to someone who's visually impaired, and that's really tragic. But she gave me that little one nutshell. So like that, if all the teachers and the parents and those stakeholders involved could actually document the stuff, that the problems, that it would make an encyclopedia of specifics, statements that could be dealt with, and that's something that would be really helpful. Xavier Source did it with their degrees of accessibility, and similarly, anyone who's working in this realm could add to that research in different fields and create this kind of a repertoire of information that we could tap into, and get students to actually work on something tangible, and projects to them and things like that. So that's something that it would be nice if we could harness that information that's available with the teachers and the parents and stakeholders.
Correct. Thank you so much, Paul, for adding to that. This panel discussion has truly been insightful, and I feel all of us had a similar line of thought that though we have come really far in our journey towards making STEM education accessible, but there's still a long way to go. We all of us highlighted about the fact that there are systemic as well as societal challenges for the children with visual impairment to access STEM education. It shouldn't just be either or. It is together as an ecosystem. Each of the stakeholders as well as each of the problems need to be addressed and answered. And just to give a recap of what we discussed. So we discussed, Karthik highlighted that we have systemic as well as societal challenges within the Indian education system, and it is not just finding solutions for the problems in the latter stages, but also starting with formative education, ensuring that access to resources and also making effective pedagogies available for students as well as teachers to make sure that the learning takes place in a right manner. And Pulkit added to the panel how tactile diagrams are created, how tactile diagrams are actually bridging the gap for students in accessing STEM content. While Paul added how technologies have played a vital role in for students to access content, but there's still so much more to explore and so much more to innovate in terms of making content accessible. And Chandra added how learning management systems can be made accessible for people with visual impairment by ensuring that they are checking off the guidelines that are available for all. So I think we've come to the end of the panel discussion, and we all can agree on the fact that to truly empower students with visual impairment, it is not just resources, materials, and technologies, but also the psychosocial support that they should have around them to give them the option of studying STEM education, to give them the choice as a sighted child has. So we have come a long way, and there's still so much work left to do. And we're glad that we get to work with our partners, that is all of you here, to continue the work that we are doing in achieving the vision of making STEM education accessible for children with visual impairment in India. So I want to thank all of you, all our esteemed panelists, for taking out the time and sharing your expertise and knowledge with us. I'm sure the insights you provided resonate with us our audience and our supporters. And I would also like to ask the audience if they have any questions to fill it in the comment section. So we can get those answered on our social media platforms, which would also have the links in the description box below. So, and if you want any more updates on our activities that we've conducted as part of the Global Accessibility for Awareness Day, you can again follow us on our social media to get those updates. Thank you once again to all, to our panelists, our team members, our audience members, for your thoughtful or active participation, for your thoughtfulness, and more than anything, your enthusiasm and dedication to making STEM education accessible. And I would also like to extend a special thank you to all our organizers who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make this event possible. And let us all continue to have such conversations and collaborations that together we can make STEM education accessible in the Indian education system. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.